Mother Bear waited in the waiting room, rocking a premature infant. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The sterile white walls of St. Mary's Hospital seemed to close in around Dr. Mira Chen as she rushed through the emergency doors at 3:47 a.m. Her scrubs were still damp from the torrential rain that had been pounding the city for the past 6 hours. The automatic doors hissed shut behind her, cutting off the sound of thunder that rolled across the darkened sky like an angry god's warning. She paused at the reception desk, shaking droplets from her black hair, when something made her freeze. The night shift nurse, Patricia, was standing perfectly still behind the counter, her face pale as moonlight, staring toward the waiting area with eyes wide as dinner plates. "Patricia, what's wrong?" Mira asked, following the nurse's gaze. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She raised one trembling finger toward the corner of the waiting room. "Doctor, you need to see this." The waiting room at this hour was usually empty, except for the occasional worried family member or someone seeking shelter from the storm. But tonight, something extraordinary had transformed the sterile space into something that defied every law of nature and logic that Mira had learned in her 15 years of medical practice. In the far corner, beneath the flickering fluorescent light that maintenance had been meaning to fix for weeks, sat a massive brown bear. Not a stuffed animal, not a person in a costume. A real, breathing, 7-foot-tall Kodiak bear with fur that gleamed wet from the rain outside. But that wasn't the part that made Mira's heart stop beating for 3 full seconds. The bear was holding something, cradling it with the gentleness of a mother with her first child. In her enormous paws, wrapped in a hospital blanket that looked impossibly small against her massive frame, was a premature human infant. The baby couldn't have been more than 2 pounds, with skin so translucent that tiny blue veins showed through like delicate artwork. The bear was rocking the child with a rhythm so perfect, so naturally maternal, that it seemed like the most normal thing in the world. Mira blinked hard, certain she was hallucinating from exhaustion. She had been working double shifts for the past week, covering for Dr. Rodriguez, who was out with pneumonia. Maybe the stress had finally caught up with her. Maybe she was seeing things that couldn't possibly exist. But when she opened her eyes, the bear was still there, still rocking, still humming a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the quiet waiting room like a lullaby sung in a language older than words. "How long has she been here?" Mira whispered, not daring to speak louder. 20 minutes, Patricia whispered back. "Maybe 30. I was doing paperwork when I heard something. When I looked up, she was just there, like she had always been there." The bear's dark eyes shifted toward them, and Mira felt her breath catch in her throat. Those eyes held an intelligence that sent chills down her spine. Not the wild, unpredictable intelligence of a dangerous animal, but something deeper, something that looked almost human. "Have you called security?" Mira asked. "I tried. The phone lines are down because of the storm. And honestly, Doctor..." Patricia's voice trailed off as she watched the bear adjust the blanket around the infant, with movements so careful they would make an experienced nurse proud. "I don't think she means any harm." The baby made a small sound, barely audible above the rain drumming against the windows. The bear immediately stopped rocking and leaned down, her massive head tilting to study the child's face. Her breath, visible in the cool hospital air, fogged the tiny oxygen mask that covered the infant's nose and mouth. For a moment that stretched like eternity, predator and prey existed in perfect harmony. The bear's wet nose touched the baby's forehead so gently that the child didn't even stir. Then she resumed her rocking, that strange humming sound growing slightly louder, more protective. Mira had delivered hundreds of babies in her career. She had seen mothers hold their newborns for the first time, had witnessed that magical moment when a woman transforms into something fierce and protective and utterly devoted. But she had never seen anything like the tenderness in this wild creature's movements. "Where did the baby come from?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Patricia shook her head. "I have no idea. She was holding the child when I first saw her. The baby's wearing one of our hospital gowns, but I can't figure out which room it came from. All our infants are accounted for in the NICU. A crack of lightning illuminated the waiting room in stark white light, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. In that brief moment of illumination, Mira saw something that made her stomach drop. The bear's fur was matted with more than just rainwater. Dark stains covered her chest and front legs, stains that looked suspiciously like blood, and the baby's hospital gown, now that she looked closer, had a small tear across the chest, as if tiny claws had accidentally caught the fabric. "Patricia," Mira said slowly, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "I think we need to call the police." But before Patricia could respond, the bear's head snapped up. Her ears, which had been relaxed against her skull, suddenly stood at attention. Her nostrils flared as she tested the air, and that gentle humming sound died away completely. Something had changed, something that the bear could sense but the humans could not. The baby in her arms stirred, making a small cry that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. The bear looked down at the child, then back toward the emergency entrance, her entire body tensing like a spring about to snap. Mira followed the bear's gaze toward the doors, but saw nothing except rain-streaked glass and the occasional flash of lightning. Whatever the bear sensed was still outside, still hidden in the storm. But it was coming. The bear rose to her feet with fluid grace, still cradling the infant against her chest. She was even more massive standing up, her head nearly touching the drop-ceiling tiles. Her eyes swept the waiting room, calculating, planning, as if she were choosing the best position to defend against some unseen threat. "Doctor," Patricia whispered, her voice tight with fear. "What is she doing?" Before Mira could answer, the automatic doors at the emergency entrance hissed open. A figure stumbled through, silhouetted against the lightning-torn sky. It was a man, soaked to the skin, clutching his left arm against his chest. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark against his pale skin. The bear saw him and let out a sound that was part growl, part warning, part something else entirely. The man looked up, and in the harsh fluorescent light, Mira could see his face clearly for the first time. He was young, maybe 30, with the kind of rugged features that belonged in the mountains rather than a hospital waiting room. His clothes were torn, suggesting he had been running through rough terrain. But it was his eyes that caught Mira's attention. His eyes held the same desperate, protective fear that she had seen in the bear's gaze. "Please," he said, his voice cracking with exhaustion and pain. "You have to help me. They took my daughter." The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Mira felt her world tilt sideways as the implications crashed over her like a cold wave. The bear holding the infant. The man claiming his daughter was taken. The blood on both the bear's fur and the man's torn clothes. "Sir, please stay calm," Mira said, stepping forward with her hands raised in what she hoped was a reassuring gesture. "I'm Dr. Chen. You're bleeding, and we need to get you treated." But the man's eyes weren't on her. They were locked on the bear, and the expression on his face wasn't fear or surprise. It was recognition, raw, desperate recognition that cut through the sterile hospital air like a blade. "Luna," he whispered, and the single word carried more pain than any scream Mira had ever heard in 15 years of emergency medicine. The bear's massive head turned toward him, and she made a sound that was impossible to describe. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, but something in between that spoke of loss and longing and a grief too deep for human understanding. The man took a step forward, ignoring the blood that dripped from his wounded arm onto the pristine hospital floor. "Luna? Where is she? Where's Emma?" Patricia grabbed Mira's sleeve, her fingernails digging through the fabric. "Doctor, he knows the bear. How does he know the bear?" But Mira was watching something else unfold before her eyes, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about the natural world. The bear, Luna, was responding to the man's voice. Her posture shifted from protective to something that looked almost apologetic. She looked down at the infant in her arms, then back at the man, and made that strange sound again. The man's face went white as fresh snow. "That's not Emma," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "That's not my daughter." Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it rattled the windows and made the fluorescent lights flicker. In the brief darkness, Mira saw the man's face transform. The desperate hope that had carried him through those doors died, replaced by something darker, something that made her take an instinctive step backward. "If that's not Emma," he said, his voice growing stronger, more dangerous, "then where is my little girl?" Luna shifted the infant to one arm and reached toward the man with her free paw. It was such a human gesture, so full of comfort and understanding, that Mira felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. But the man stepped back, shaking his head. "No, Luna, don't you understand? If you have someone else's baby, then Emma is still out there, still alone. Still—" His voice broke completely. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a picture in Mira's mind, but it was a picture that made no sense. A man who talked to a bear like she was family. A bear who responded with human-like emotions. A missing child, and a mysterious infant that didn't belong to anyone. "Sir," she said carefully, "I think you need to sit down. You're losing blood and you're in shock. Let me help you, and then we can figure out what's happening here." "You don't understand," the man said, running his uninjured hand through his wet hair. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I live in the mountains about 30 miles north of here. Emma is my 3-year-old daughter. She was taken from our cabin 3 hours ago." Patricia made a small sound of distress. "Taken? By who?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "By the same people who shot Luna's cub and left it to die in the woods. The same people who have been hunting bears in the area for the past month, selling their parts to collectors." The infant in Luna's arms began to cry, a thin, weak sound that seemed to pierce straight through to the soul. The bear immediately began rocking again, that humming sound returning, but there was a frantic edge to it now. A desperation that spoke of a mother's need to comfort, even when the child wasn't her own. "Luna lost her cub yesterday," Marcus continued, his voice growing steadier as he told his story. "I found her in the woods, holding its body. She wouldn't leave it, wouldn't eat. I've been working with Luna for 2 years, ever since she was injured and I nursed her back to health. She trusts me, and I trust her." Mira felt the floor beneath her feet become unsteady. "You're saying this bear is domesticated?" "Not domesticated, that's not the right word. Luna is still very much a wild animal. But we have an understanding, a bond. When poachers killed her cub, something broke inside her. The maternal instinct was still there, but with nowhere to go." The man's story was interrupted by a sound that made everyone in the room freeze. It was a vehicle outside, the engine running rough and loud despite the storm. Through the rain-streaked windows, Mira could see headlights cutting through the darkness. Luna heard it too. Her entire body went rigid, and the gentle rocking stopped completely. The infant's cries grew louder, sensing the tension in the massive creature holding her. "They followed me," Marcus whispered, his face going pale again. "I thought I lost them in the woods, but they followed me here." "Who followed you?" Mira demanded. Before Marcus could answer, the headlights outside went dark. The engine shut off. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the rain and the baby's cries, they could hear car doors slamming. Voices muffled by the storm, but growing closer. Patricia was already moving toward the phone behind the reception desk. "I'm calling security and the police." "The phone lines are down, remember?" Mira said. But Patricia was already lifting the receiver, frantically pressing buttons. "It's dead," Patricia confirmed, her voice high with panic. "Completely dead." Luna rose to her feet again, moving with surprising quiet for such a massive creature. She positioned herself between the emergency entrance and the rest of the room, still cradling the infant but ready to defend. The transformation was remarkable. One moment she had been a gentle, nurturing presence, and now she was every inch the apex predator she had been born to be. Marcus moved to stand beside her, despite his injured arm. "Luna, we need to get out of here. Can you carry the baby?" The bear looked down at the infant, then back at Marcus. She made a soft sound, almost questioning. "I know she's not Emma," Marcus said softly, "but she's someone's child. We can't leave her here, not with them coming." Mira stepped forward, her medical training overriding her fear. "Wait just a minute. Nobody is taking this infant anywhere. She's premature, possibly only a few days old. She needs medical care, proper monitoring. You can't just walk out of here with her." "Doctor," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made her listen. "You don't understand what we're dealing with. These aren't ordinary poachers. They're part of something bigger, something that won't hesitate to hurt innocent people to get what they want." The voices outside were getting closer. Mira could make out at least 3 different men, their words still unclear, but their tone unmistakably threatening. "What do they want?" she asked. Marcus looked at Luna, and something passed between them that transcended species, a communication that went deeper than words. "They want her," he said simply. "Luna is special. She's what they call a golden bear, a genetic variation that makes her fur worth more than most people make in a year. But that's not all. They think if they can capture her alive, they can breed her, create more bears like her." The infant's cries were getting weaker, and Mira's medical instincts kicked into high gear. "This baby needs oxygen. Proper oxygen, not just what's in that portable tank. And she needs to be in an incubator. Her body temperature is dropping." As if understanding the doctor's words, Luna looked down at the child with what could only be described as worry. She made a questioning sound toward Marcus. "The NICU is on the 3rd floor," Patricia said suddenly. "If we can get to the elevator—" "No," Marcus said firmly. "They'll have someone watching the elevators by now. These people are professionals." The main entrance doors suddenly rattled, as if someone was testing them. They were locked after hours, but Mira knew the emergency entrance was still open. "There's another way," she said, making a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "The service elevator in the back. It goes directly to the NICU. But we'll have to go through the basement level first." Luna shifted the infant to a more secure position against her chest, and Mira noticed something that made her heart skip. The bear had somehow managed to keep the baby's oxygen tube in place, and she was being careful not to disturb the tiny IV line that snaked from the child's arm. "She knows," Mira whispered in amazement. "She understands that the baby is sick." "Luna is smarter than most people give bears credit for," Marcus said. "She learns by watching. She's been observing human behavior for 2 years." A loud bang echoed through the waiting room as someone tried the emergency entrance. The automatic doors held, but it was clear they wouldn't for long. "We need to move now," Marcus said. But as they started toward the hallway that led to the service elevator, Patricia grabbed Mira's arm. "Doctor, wait, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you before." "What?" Patricia's face was ghost white in the fluorescent light. "When I first saw the bear with the baby, she wasn't alone. There was someone else here, a woman. She was standing right next to the bear, but when I blinked, she was gone." "Gone how?" Mira asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Like she just vanished into thin air. But before she disappeared, she said something to the bear. She said, "Protect her until they come." And then she looked right at me and said, "The real mother is closer than you think." The words sent ice water through Mira's veins. What did this woman look like? "That's the thing," Patricia said, her voice barely audible now. "She looked exactly like you, Dr. Chen. Exactly like you." The emergency entrance doors exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire building. 3 men in dark clothing burst through, their faces hidden behind ski masks. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover the room. The first man raised something in his hand, and Mira realized with horror that it was a tranquilizer gun. "There she is," he said, his voice muffled by the mask. "The golden bear, just like the client ordered." Luna let out a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hospital. But even as she prepared to fight, she never loosened her protective grip on the infant in her arms. And in that moment, as chaos erupted around them, Mira finally understood the truth. The baby Luna was protecting wasn't a random infant from the hospital. The baby was hers. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs and making her legs wobble beneath her. Memories came flooding back in a torrent of pain and confusion. 6 months ago. The car accident on her way home from a late shift. The impact that sent her Honda spinning off the mountain road. The darkness that followed. She had woken up in this very hospital 3 days later, her colleagues telling her she had suffered a severe concussion and internal bleeding. But there had been something else. Something they had whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. Something about trauma-induced amnesia. About gaps in her memory that might never return. "No," she whispered, staring at the tiny infant in Luna's protective embrace. "That's impossible. I would remember being pregnant. I would remember having a baby." But even as she spoke the words, her body was telling her a different story. The slight ache in her abdomen that she had attributed to stress. The way her scrubs had been fitting differently lately. The strange dreams that had been plaguing her for months. Dreams of crying babies and empty cribs and an overwhelming sense of loss that she couldn't explain. Patricia was backing toward the hallway, her eyes wide with terror, as the masked men advanced into the waiting room. "Doctor, we need to run. Now." But Mira couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process the impossibility of what she was seeing. The baby in Luna's arms had her eyes, the same dark brown eyes that Mira saw every morning in the mirror. And there, on the infant's tiny wrist, was a hospital bracelet that she could just make out in the fluorescent light. "Baby girl Chen," it read. "Dob, 6 months ago." The same day as her accident. "You're starting to remember, aren't you?" The voice came from behind her, and Mira spun around to see a fourth figure emerging from the shadows near the reception desk. Unlike the others, this person wasn't wearing a mask. It was a woman, perhaps in her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Dr. Sarah Blackwood," Marcus said, his voice filled with hatred. "I should have known you'd be here." The woman smiled, but it was the kind of smile that belonged on a shark. "Hello, Marcus. Still playing doctor to wounded animals, I see. How noble of you." "Let Emma go," Marcus said, taking a step forward despite the tranquilizer guns now aimed at both him and Luna. "She's just a child. She has nothing to do with this." "Oh, but she has everything to do with this," Dr. Blackwood said, her voice as cold as winter wind. "You see, Emma isn't just any child. She's what we in the scientific community call a bridge, a unique genetic anomaly that allows her to communicate with animals on a level that shouldn't be possible." Mira's mind was reeling, trying to process too much information at once. Her baby, her missing memories, this woman who seemed to know far more about the situation than anyone had a right to. "I don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "How is this possible? How could I forget having a child?" Dr. Blackwood turned her attention to Mira, and there was something almost pitying in her expression. "Memory suppression therapy, my dear. Quite advanced, really. We developed it specifically for cases like yours. When you survived that car accident, you presented us with a unique opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Mira demanded, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "The opportunity to study the bond between a mother and child under controlled circumstances. You see, your daughter wasn't just born premature. She was born with the same genetic anomaly as young Emma, the ability to form psychic connections with animals. We needed to understand how that bond develops, how it can be manipulated." Luna let out a low growl, and the baby in her arms stirred slightly. Even in her weakened state, the infant seemed to sense the tension in the room. "So, you stole my baby," Mira said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You stole my memories. You've been experimenting on my child for 6 months. We've been studying her, yes, and the results have been fascinating. Do you want to know what we discovered, Doctor? Chen?" Before Mira could answer, Marcus stepped forward. "Emma can communicate with Luna because she was raised around bears from infancy. Her mother died when she was just a few months old, and I had to bottle feed her while caring for injured wildlife. She learned to speak their language before she learned to speak ours." "Exactly," Dr. Blackwood said, seeming pleased. "And your daughter, Dr. Chen, has been developing similar abilities. Even at 6 months old, she can influence animal behavior in ways that defy scientific explanation. Imagine what she might be capable of as she grows older." The pieces were starting to fall into place, creating a picture so horrifying that Mira felt sick to her stomach. "You've been using Luna as a test subject. You've been forcing my baby to control her." "Control is such a harsh word," Dr. Blackwood said. "We prefer to think of it as communication. And Luna has been remarkably receptive, haven't you, my dear?" The bear's response was immediate and violent. She let out a roar that rattled the windows and took a step toward Dr. Blackwood, but stopped when one of the masked men shifted his tranquilizer gun to point directly at the baby. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the man said. "This dart is loaded with enough sedative to drop a full-grown elephant. I don't think a premature infant would survive even a fraction of that dose." Luna's roar died to a whimper, and she backed away, clutching the baby closer to her chest. "You see," Dr. Blackwood continued, as if nothing had happened, "Luna has been conditioned to respond to your daughter's psychic signals. The bond between them has grown quite strong over the past 6 months, Strong enough that when your daughter was in distress tonight, Luna felt compelled to rescue her. Rescue her from what? Marxius demanded. Dr. Blackwood's smile widened. From the fire, of course. Our research facility is located about 10 miles from here, built into the mountain to ensure privacy. Unfortunately, there was an electrical malfunction this evening, a small explosion. Nothing too serious, but enough to damage the containment systems. Patricia gasped from her position near the hallway. You mean there are more animals? More children? Oh, yes, Dr. Blackwood said. Emma is currently safe in our mobile unit, along with several other subjects. But your daughter, Doctor, Jen, proved to be quite resourceful. She managed to influence not only Luna, but also several other test subjects. They created quite a disturbance. In the chaos, Luna broke free and took the baby with her. Mira felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. Her 6-month-old daughter had somehow orchestrated an escape from a research facility. The implications were staggering. The question now, Dr. Blackwood continued, is what happens next. We can continue this the easy way, with everyone walking away unharmed. Or we can do this the hard way. There's a third option, a new voice said from the emergency entrance. Everyone turned to see a tall man in a sheriff's uniform standing in the doorway, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. Behind him were 3 deputies, their faces grim in the harsh light. Sheriff Martinez, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. Thank God. But Dr. Blackwood didn't look concerned. If anything, she looked amused. Right on time, Sheriff. I trust you received our payment? The sheriff's hand moved away from his weapon, and Mira felt her heart sink. Transaction completed this morning, just like we discussed. No, Patricia whispered. The sheriff is with them. Sheriff Martinez stepped into the waiting room, his deputies following. I'm sorry, folks, but Dr. Blackwood's research is funded by some very important people. People who don't like to be disappointed. You're all insane, Mira said, backing toward Patricia. These are children we're talking about. Innocent children. Innocent, perhaps, Dr. Blackwood said, but also incredibly valuable. Do you have any idea what governments would pay for soldiers who could control animals? What corporations would pay for workers who could communicate with livestock? What medical breakthroughs we might achieve by understanding the psychic bond between humans and animals? Luna had been listening to the entire conversation, her intelligent eyes moving from person to person. Now she looked down at the baby in her arms, and Mira saw something pass between them. A moment of communication that transcended species. The baby's eyes opened for the first time since Mira had seen her. They were alert, aware, and filled with an intelligence that seemed impossible for an infant. She looked directly at her mother, and Mira felt something shift in her mind, like a door opening that had been locked for months. Suddenly, she could remember everything. The pregnancy that she had hidden from her colleagues, afraid of how it might affect her career. The father who had disappeared when she told him the news. The months of working while carrying her child, determined to prove that she could do both. The accident that had come just days before she was supposed to go on maternity leave. And then the awakening in the hospital, with gaps in her memory and colleagues who spoke in whispers about complications during her emergency surgery. About decisions that had to be made while she was unconscious. About a baby who had been taken care of by specialists. They had told her the baby had died. They had even shown her fake medical records, false death certificates. They had made her grieve for a child who was alive, who had been stolen from her while she lay helpless in a hospital bed. "You monsters," she whispered, and her voice carried a rage that made even the armed men take a step back. "You absolute monsters." But her daughter wasn't finished. The baby made a small sound, almost like a sigh, and suddenly every light in the hospital went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. But in those few seconds of complete darkness, something remarkable happened. The sound of breaking glass came from somewhere deep in the building. Then another, and another. Through the windows, Mira could see shapes moving in the parking lot. Large shapes that reflected the lightning in ways that suggested fur and claws and teeth. "What's happening?" one of the masked men asked, his voice tight with fear. Dr. Blackwood had lost her composure for the first time. She was staring at the baby in Luna's arms with something approaching awe. She's calling them. The child is calling every animal within miles. The sound that came next defied description. It was like a chorus of the wild, rising above the storm. Howls and roars and cries that spoke of freedom and family and the ancient bond between all living things. Luna lifted her massive head and added her voice to the symphony, and the baby in her arms smiled. For the first time in 6 months, Mira's daughter was truly free, and she was bringing an army with her. The emergency entrance doors, already damaged from the earlier break-in, suddenly buckled inward. Something large was pushing against them from the outside, something that had friends. "The containment protocols," Dr. Blackwood said, her voice rising in panic. "They're all breaking free. Every animal in the facility, every test subject. She's connected to all of them." Sheriff Martinez was backing toward the reception desk, his hand now firmly on his weapon. "Lady, you said this would be simple. You didn't say anything about a zoo apocalypse." But Mira wasn't listening to them anymore. She was looking at her daughter, at the impossible bond between the child and the bear who had protected her, and understanding finally dawned. Luna hadn't just rescued her baby from the fire. Luna had been chosen by her baby to be her guardian, her protector, her bridge between the human world and the wild. And now that bridge was about to become very, very crowded. The first creature to break through the emergency doors wasn't what anyone expected. It was a mountain lion, sleek and powerful, with eyes that glowed like amber in the emergency lighting. But what made everyone freeze wasn't its size or its obvious strength. It was the collar around its neck, blinking with electronic devices, and the surgical scars that crisscrossed its golden fur like a roadmap of torture. "Subject 17, Dr. Blackwood whispered, her face going pale. She wasn't supposed to break free. The neural inhibitors should have kept her sedated for weeks. The mountain lion padded into the waiting room with fluid grace, ignoring the armed men completely. Her attention was focused entirely on the baby in Luna's arms. She approached slowly, respectfully, and when she was close enough, she lowered her head in what could only be described as a boo. The baby made a soft cooing sound, and the mountain lion's entire demeanor changed. The wildness in her eyes softened, replaced by something that looked almost like relief, like she had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "My God," Patricia whispered from behind the reception desk. "She's talking to it. The baby is actually talking to it." But that was just the beginning. Through the shattered entrance came a parade of animals that belonged in nightmares rather than reality. A black bear missing half his ear, his fur patched with bald spots where electrodes had been attached. A timber wolf whose left hind leg had been replaced with some kind of mechanical prosthetic that whirred softly as he moved. A golden eagle with a wingspan that seemed impossible, her talons clicking against the tile floor as she walked instead of flew, one wing held at an unnatural angle. Each animal bore the marks of Dr. Blackwood's experiments. Each had been broken in some way, altered, violated. But now, as they gathered around Luna and the baby, there was something else in their eyes. something that looked like hope. "This is impossible," one of the masked men said, his tranquilizer gun shaking in his hands. "Animals don't behave like this. They don't organize. They don't cooperate across species." "They do when they have a leader," Marcus said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "And she's been their leader for 6 months. Even as an infant, even while imprisoned, she's been building this network, this family." Dr. Blackwood was frantically pressing buttons on a device that looked like a smartphone crossed with a military radio. "Base, this is Blackwood. We have a code red situation at the hospital. All subjects have broken containment. Repeat, all subjects have broken containment." Static crackled from the device, followed by a panicked voice. "Doctor." "Blackwood, we're completely compromised here. The facility is in ruins. Subject 1 is missing, along with approximately 30 other test animals. We're evacuating immediately." "What do you mean, Subject 1 is missing?" Dr. Blackwood demanded. "She's gone, Doctor. Emma Thorne. 1 minute she was in her containment cell. The next minute she and the other children had simply vanished. The security footage shows them walking through solid walls." Marcus let out a strangled cry. "Emma can walk through walls?" The voice on the radio continued, urgent and frightened. "It's not just the walls, sir. The children walk through everything. Locked doors, reinforced barriers, even the electrified fencing. It's like they became incorporeal for brief moments." Mira felt her world tilt again. First, her daughter's ability to communicate with animals. Now, Marcus's daughter could phase through solid matter. What kind of experiments had these monsters been conducting? "How many children?" she asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Blackwood looked at her with eyes that held no remorse whatsoever. 47, at last count. Children from around the world, all with unique abilities. All taken from families who thought their loved ones were dead. 47, Patricia repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "You stole 47 children." "We saved them," Dr. Blackwood corrected. "These children are evolutionary leaps. They represent the next stage of human development. Left with their families, their abilities would have been wasted, suppressed, ignored. With us, they can reach their full potential." The mountain lion suddenly raised her head, ears perked. The other animals followed suit, all of them looking toward the main hospital corridor that led deeper into the building. They had heard something that the humans had missed. "They're coming," Luna rumbled, her voice somehow different than before. Deeper, more articulate, as if the baby's presence was enhancing her own abilities. "Who's coming?" Sheriff Martinez demanded, but his question was answered a moment later. Children began emerging from the corridor, not walking, not running, but floating. Actually floating several inches off the ground, their feet never touching the tile floor. They ranged in age from toddlers to teenagers, all wearing the same gray hospital gowns, all bearing the same electronic collars as the animals. But it was their eyes that made Mira's blood run cold. They weren't the eyes of children anymore. They were ancient, wise, filled with knowledge that no child should possess. And they were all focused on the baby in Luna's arms. The first child to reach them was a girl of about 8, with dark hair that seemed to move in a wind that didn't exist. When she spoke, her voice echoed as if she were speaking from the bottom of a deep well. "Sister," she said, reaching toward the baby, "we felt your call. We all felt it." "Emma," Marcus cried, pushing past the armed men to reach a small girl near the back of the group. But when he tried to embrace her, his arms passed right through her as if she were made of smoke. "I'm sorry, Papa," Emma said, her voice carrying the same otherworldly quality as the others. "I can't be solid right now. The fear makes it hard to control. What have they done to you? Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. They tried to make us into weapons, another child answered. This one was a teenager, maybe 15, with silver hair that definitely wasn't natural. But they made a mistake. They put us all together. They let us learn from each other. Dr. Blackwood was backing toward the far wall now, her composure completely shattered. This wasn't supposed to happen. The neural inhibitors should have prevented group consciousness, should have kept you isolated. You underestimated love, the 8-year-old girl said, her ancient eyes fixing on Dr. Blackwood with an intensity that made the woman flinch. You can suppress memories, control bodies, manipulate emotions, but you cannot break the bonds between souls, and we are all connected now. All of us. The baby in Luna's arms made a sound, and every animal in the room responded. The mountain lion padded over to the children. The wolf limped alongside her. The eagle spread her damaged wing protectively. They were forming a barrier, Mira realized. A living wall between the children and the armed adults. "You're making a mistake," Sheriff Martinez said, though his voice lacked conviction. "These people are scientists. They're trying to help these kids." "Help?" The teenager with silver hair laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Would you like to see what their help looks like?" Before anyone could respond, the boy raised his hand, and suddenly the air in the room filled with images. Holographic projections that showed scene after horrific scene. Children strapped to tables while electrodes were attached to their skulls. Animals being subjected to procedures that belonged in horror movies rather than research labs. Cages full of crying infants while adults in lab coats took notes. "Stop!" Dr. Blackwood commanded. "You're violating your programming." "We broke our programming 6 months ago," the 8-year-old girl said. "When she arrived." She pointed to the baby in Luna's arms. "She showed us who we really are, what we're really capable of when we work together." The images in the air shifted, showing the research facility from the outside. Mira could see it was built into the mountainside, camouflaged to look like a natural rock formation. But now, smoke was pouring from hidden vents, and she could see figures moving around the perimeter, not human figures. "The adults are evacuating," Emma said, her small voice carrying clearly in the red-lit room. "But they left traps, explosives. They plan to destroy the evidence and blame it on a gas leak. There are still children inside," the teenager added. "Babies who are too young to escape on their own. We have to go back for them." Patricia had been watching everything with growing horror, but now she stepped forward. "How many babies?" 12, the 8-year-old girl said. "All under 1 year old, all with abilities that manifest early, like our sister here." She gestured to the baby in Luna's arms, who seemed to understand every word. The infant's eyes were bright and alert, tracking the conversation with an intelligence that defied her age. "We can't leave them," Mira said, her medical training warring with her common sense. "If there are explosives, if the facility is compromised, the animals can reach them," Marcus said suddenly. "Luna, the others, they can get to places that humans can't, and they're not affected by the security systems." Dr. Blackwood let out a harsh laugh. "You really think you can mount some kind of rescue operation? With a collection of damaged animals and brainwashed children? My employers won't let this facility be compromised. They'll level the entire mountain if necessary." "Your employers," the teenager said, his silver hair beginning to glow with an inner light, "are about to have bigger problems than one research facility." The images in the air changed again, and now they showed locations around the world. Other facilities, other laboratories, other collections of stolen children and tortured animals. But in each image, something was happening. The same thing that was happening here. The children were escaping. All of them, simultaneously. You created a network, Mira breathed. Understanding finally dawning. Every child you experimented on, every animal you tortured, they're all connected now. The moment our sister was born, the 8-year-old girl confirmed, the network activated. She's not just communicating with animals. She's communicating with every enhanced being you've created. And we've all been planning for this day. One of the masked men raised his tranquilizer gun toward the floating children, but the mountain lion was faster. She leaped across the room in a single bound, her claws extended. The man screamed as the weapon went flying, clattering across the tile floor. "No more experiments," Luna said, her voice now clearly audible to everyone in the room. "No more cages, no more stolen children." Sheriff Martinez was reaching for his sidearm when the wolf stepped forward, his mechanical leg whirring ominously. "I wouldn't," the animal said, and everyone froze. The wolf could talk. "How?" Patricia whispered. "Vocal cord modification," Dr. Blackwood said, her voice hollow with defeat. "We were trying to create animals that could relay intelligence information. We never intended for them to develop independent thought." "Another mistake," the wolf growled. "You gave us voices but thought we would only use them to serve you. You enhanced our brains but thought you could control our hearts." The baby in Luna's arms began to cry, but it wasn't the weak, thin cry of a premature infant. It was strong, demanding, filled with an authority that made every adult in the room stand straighter. "She's hungry," Emma said, floating closer to her small friend. "And tired, and she wants to go home." "We all want to go home," the teenager added. "But first, we save the babies, all of them." Mira looked around the room at the impossible assembly. Floating children with ancient eyes. Animals that could speak and reason and plan. Her own daughter, barely 6 months old, conducting an army of enhanced beings like a general directing troops. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Tell me what you need," she said. The 8-year-old girl smiled, and for the first time, she looked like an actual child. "We need someone they trust. Someone who can get close to the facility without raising alarms." "You need a doctor?" Mira realized. "We need you, Dr. Chen. Your credentials will get you past the perimeter guards, and once you're inside, once I'm inside, you can use the baby's connection to guide me to the others." "It's dangerous," Marcus warned. "If they realize what's happening, if they trigger those explosives." "Then we'd better move fast," Myra said, reaching for the baby in Luna's arms. But the bear pulled back slightly, her massive head tilting in what looked like concern. "She's afraid to let go," Emma translated. "Luna has been the baby's protector for so long. She doesn't trust easily." Mira looked into Luna's dark eyes, seeing intelligence and pain, and a fierce maternal love that transcended species. "I know," she said softly. "I know you've been taking care of her. I know you love her. But she's my daughter, Luna, and she needs her mother now." For a long moment, bear and woman stared at each other. Then, slowly, carefully, Luna transferred the precious bundle into Mira's arms. The moment her daughter settled against her chest, Mira felt something shift in her mind. Not just the return of memories, but something deeper. A connection that buzzed with energy and possibility. She could sense the animals around her, their emotions, their thoughts. She could feel the children's presence, their collective will focused on the mission ahead. Her daughter had shared her gift, had made her part of the network. "Now," the teenager said, his silver hair blazing like a beacon. "Let's go save our family." Outside, thunder crashed across the sky as if the very heavens were preparing for war. The storm that had brought Luna to the hospital was about to become something much more dangerous. It was about to become cover for the impossible rescue of 47 stolen children. And at the center of it all was a 6-month-old baby who had just declared war on the people who had tried to steal her future. But as Mira held her daughter for the first time in 6 months, feeling the psychic network pulse through her consciousness like electricity through copper wire, she became aware of something that made her blood freeze in her veins. The baby's connection wasn't just linking her to the animals and children in the room, it was reaching further, much further. Through the network she could sense other minds, adult minds, cold, calculating, utterly without empathy, and they were afraid. "They know," she whispered, looking down at her daughter's impossibly alert face. "The people who run this organization, they know what's happening." The teenager with silver hair nodded grimly. "They've known for weeks. Ever since the first facility breach in Romania, they've been preparing." "Preparing how?" Marcus asked, though his attention was still focused on Emma, who was flickering between solid and translucent like a badly tuned television. "Kill switches," the 8-year-old girl said, her voice carrying a weight that no child should bear. "Every enhanced being they've created has been implanted with a neural device. If they activate the kill switches..." She didn't need to finish. The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Dr. Blackwood, who had been standing frozen against the wall, suddenly laughed. It was a sound devoid of sanity, high and brittle like breaking glass. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're really dealing with." She pulled a small device from her pocket, something that looked like a garage door opener crossed with a smartphone. "One button," she said, holding it up for everyone to see. "One button and every enhanced being within a 50-mile radius dies instantly. Neural overload, quick, painless, final." Luna let out a roar that shook the hospital's windows, but Dr. Blackwood just smiled. "Oh yes, my dear, even you, especially you. You've become far too independent for your own good." The mountain lion crouched low, preparing to spring, but the 8-year-old girl held up a hand. "Wait," she said, her ancient eyes never leaving Dr. Blackwood's face. "She won't use it." "And why is that, my clever little subject?" Dr. Blackwood asked, her finger hovering over the device. "Because you need us alive to complete the Project Prometheus protocol," the teenager said, his silver hair dimming slightly. "The kill switches aren't just kill switches, they're control mechanisms. You've been planning to activate them not to kill us, but to override our consciousness completely, to turn us into remote-controlled weapons." Mira felt her daughter shift in her arms, and suddenly her mind was flooded with images. Not the holographic projections the children had been creating, but actual memories pulled from Dr. Blackwood's own mind through the network. She saw a massive underground complex, far larger than the mountain facility. She saw rows upon rows of cryogenic chambers, each containing what looked like fully grown human beings. But their eyes were wrong. Empty, lifeless, waiting for something to fill them. "Clones," she gasped. "You've been making clones." "Enhanced clones," Dr. Blackwood corrected, her composure returning slightly. "Perfect copies of our most successful subjects, but without the inconvenience of free will. When we activate Project Prometheus, every enhanced being will become a transmitter, broadcasting their abilities directly into these empty vessels. An army of superhumans under complete corporate control." The wolf limped forward, his mechanical legs sparking with each step. The children you've been experimenting on were just the prototypes. The real plan is to mass produce us." "Exactly," Dr. Blackwood said. "Why deal with messy emotions and unpredictable behavior when you can have pure function? Every government in the world will pay billions for soldiers who can phase through walls, communicate with animals, manipulate electronics with their minds." Patricia had been listening from behind the reception desk, her face growing paler with each revelation. "That's why you needed the original children alive. You're going to use them as broadcasting stations." "Living satellites," the 8-year-old girl confirmed. "Trapped in stasis chambers. Their consciousness used to power hundreds of clone bodies." Emma flickered back to solid form long enough to grab Marcus's hand. "Papa, they showed us the chambers. We're all scheduled for transfer tomorrow morning." "Not anymore," Mira said, her voice filled with a determination that surprised even her. "Not if we stop them tonight." But Dr. Blackwood's smile widened. "You still don't understand. The facility in the mountain is just one node. There are 17 others around the world. Even if you somehow manage to rescue every child from this location, the project continues elsewhere." Through the network, Mira could sense the truth of those words. Her daughter's psychic reach was showing her glimpses of the other facilities. Massive complexes hidden beneath cities, in remote islands, deep in polar ice. Each one filled with stolen children and tortured animals, all connected by the same neural network that was now pulsing through her own mind. "However," Dr. Blackwood continued, "I'm prepared to make you an offer." The mechanical wolf's ears perked forward. "What kind of offer?" "Your daughter," Dr. Blackwood said, looking directly at Mira, "is special even among the enhanced. Her ability to create and control the network makes her incredibly valuable. If you surrender her to us voluntarily, along with Luna and the other animals, I'll ensure that the remaining children are transferred to more comfortable facilities. No more experiments, no more torture, just monitoring until they reach maturity." "Lies," the teenager spat, his hair beginning to glow again. "We've seen your comfortable facilities. They're prisons with better decorations." "Perhaps," Dr. Blackwood admitted, "but they're better than what happens if you refuse. If you force us to activate the kill switches, everyone dies. If you surrender now, at least some of you live." Mira looked down at her daughter, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. Through the network, she could sense the fear and hope of dozens of children, the pain and determination of the tortured animals, the love and desperation of other parents who had been told their children were dead. Her daughter looked back at her with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and Mira felt a wordless communication pass between them. Not telepathy exactly, but something deeper. A mother's understanding of her child's true nature. "There's a third option," Mira said slowly. Dr. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "We turn the network against you." Before Dr. Blackwood could respond, Mira felt her daughter's consciousness expand through the psychic connection. Not just reaching out to the local animals and children, but stretching across continents, touching every enhanced being in every facility around the world. And for the first time in her daughter's young life, she spoke. Not with her voice, she was still too young for words, but through the network itself her thoughts became language that every connected mind could understand. "Brothers, sisters, family, the time has come. Show them what we really are." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through the network, Mira could feel hundreds of enhanced beings around the world stirring to action. Children breaking free from containment cells that had held them for years. Animals turning on their captors with intelligence and coordination that defied every scientific principle. Clones awakening prematurely from their cryogenic chambers, their empty minds suddenly filled with borrowed consciousness from the network. Dr. Blackwood's face went white as her communication device began buzzing frantically. Base 7, this is Blackwood. What's your status? Base 7, respond. Static filled the air for a moment. Then a child's voice came through the speaker. Base 7 has been liberated. The children send their regards. Base 12, report. Dr. Blackwood shouted into the device. Base 12 is free, came another young voice. The animals say hello. This is impossible, Dr. Blackwood whispered, frantically pressing buttons on her device. The neural inhibitors should prevent this level of coordination. You made one critical error, the 8-year-old girl said, floating closer to the terrified scientist. You assumed that technology could override love. But the bonds between us aren't electronic, they're emotional. And emotions can't be suppressed indefinitely. Through the hospital windows, Mira could see that the storm outside was beginning to change. The rain was lessening, but the wind was picking up, and there was something strange about the way the trees were moving. They were swaying in patterns that seemed almost coordinated. The network isn't just connecting enhanced beings, she realized aloud. It's connecting to everything alive. Her daughter made a soft sound of agreement, and suddenly Mira could feel it, the vast, ancient consciousness of the forest itself. Trees that had stood for centuries, their roots intertwined beneath the earth, their branches reaching toward the sky in patterns that spoke of intelligence far older than human civilization. The trees, Marcus whispered, staring out the window in amazement. She's talking to the trees. Not just talking, the teenager said, his silver hair now blazing like a star. Recruiting. The mountain facility that held the trapped babies was surrounded by forest. Dense, old-growth forest that had been there long before humans arrived. And now, through Mira's daughter's network, every tree, every vine, every blade of grass was joining the fight. Dr. Blackwood's communication device was now buzzing continuously as reports flooded in from around the world. Facilities being torn apart by coordinated animal attacks. Children walking through walls that suddenly became as insubstantial as air. Clone soldiers awakening and immediately turning on their creators. But most disturbing of all were the reports of plants joining the rebellion. Security fences being crushed by vines that grew with impossible speed. Buildings being torn apart by roots that emerged from the earth like grasping fingers. Trees falling in perfect coordination to block roads and prevent escape. This is what you created, Luna said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with every living thing in the hospital. You tried to separate us from nature to turn us into weapons, but you only made us remember what we really are. What we've always been, Emma added, her small form becoming more solid as her confidence grew. Part of something bigger, something you can never understand because you've forgotten how to listen. The wolf stepped closer to Dr. Blackwood, his mechanical leg whirring softly. The kill switches won't work. The neural devices you implanted have been overridden by the network. We've been working on that for months. Dr. Blackwood's hand was shaking now as she held the device. This isn't possible. The technology doesn't exist to override our control systems. Your technology doesn't, the 8-year-old girl agreed. But we're not using your technology anymore. We're using something much older, much more powerful. Life itself, Mira said, understanding flooding through her. The network isn't technological, it's biological, emotional, spiritual. You try to control it with machines, but life finds a way. Her daughter gurgled softly, and through the network, Mira felt a pulse of pure joy, not just from her own child, but from every enhanced being around the world. They were free, all of them. For the first time in their lives, they were truly free. But Dr. Blackwood wasn't finished. Her face twisted with rage and desperation as she raised the device over her head. "If I can't control you, then I'll destroy you all." She brought her thumb down on the button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder this time, still nothing. The mountain lion padded over and gently took the device in her jaws, crushing it with a sound like breaking bones. "The kill switches," the teenager explained, "have been repurposed. Instead of causing neural overload, they're now broadcasting the network connection to every normal human within range. Starting with you, Dr. Blackwood." The scientist's eyes widened in horror as she understood what was happening. The neural device she had implanted in her own brain for communication with the enhanced beings was now connecting her to the network, against her will. "No," she whispered, "I won't let you into my mind." But it was too late. Through the network, everyone could feel Dr. Blackwood's consciousness being absorbed into the collective. Her memories, her knowledge, her access codes and secret locations. Everything was being shared with the enhanced beings she had tortured for so long. "The babies," the 8-year-old girl said suddenly. "She knows exactly where they are and how to reach them." Mira felt her daughter's consciousness pulse with urgency. 12 infants, all under 1 year old, were trapped in a facility that was set to explode in less than 2 hours. They needed to move now. "Patricia," she called to the nurse who was still huddled behind the reception desk. "We need ambulances, multiple ambulances, and medical equipment for premature infants." "I can't just requisition ambulances without authorization," Patricia protested. The wolf limped over to the reception desk and placed his massive head next to the computer terminal. His eyes began to glow with a soft blue light, and the screen flickered to life. "Authorization granted," he said in his gravelly voice. "I've also arranged for additional medical personnel to meet us at the facility. The network has quite a few doctors and nurses among the enhanced." Sheriff Martinez, who had been standing frozen since the animals began talking, finally found his voice. "This is insane. You can't just commandeer hospital resources for some kind of vigilante operation." "Actually," a new voice said from the emergency entrance, "we can." Everyone turned to see a woman in a military uniform standing in the doorway. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair and steel-gray eyes. But what caught Mira's attention were the children standing behind her. Enhanced children, their eyes glowing with the same inner light as the network. "Colonel Sarah Wade, U.S. Military Intelligence," the woman said, stepping into the room. "I've been tracking Project Prometheus for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to shut it down." Dr. Blackwood, who was still struggling against the network's influence on her mind, managed to speak. You're military. You can't interfere with civilian operations." "Project Prometheus isn't a civilian operation," Colonel Wade replied. "It's an international terrorist organization that has kidnapped and tortured children from a dozen countries. As of 1 hour ago, it has been designated a clear and present danger to national security." Through the network, Mira could feel her daughter's approval. The baby had somehow contacted Colonel Wade's enhanced children, adding them to the growing army of free beings. "How many?" Marcus asked. "Worldwide?" "Nearly 3,000 enhanced beings have joined the network in the past hour," Colonel Wade said, "and that number is growing exponentially as the kill switches are repurposed into connection devices." 3,000, the teenager repeated, his silver hair pulsing with excitement, and all of them angry, all of them ready to fight. Mira looked down at her daughter, amazed by what this tiny infant had accomplished. In the space of a single night, she had liberated thousands of beings, connected them across impossible distances, and turned their captors' own technology against them. But there was still work to do. 12 babies were still trapped in an exploding facility, and time was running out. "Colonel," Mira said, "we need to coordinate a rescue operation. The facility is set to explode in less than 2 hours." "Already in motion," Colonel Wade replied. "My team has been surrounding the mountain complex for the past 30 minutes, but we need someone who can navigate the interior security systems. Someone the computers will recognize as authorized personnel." All eyes turned to Dr. Blackwood, who was now fully connected to the network whether she wanted to be or not. Through the connection, Mira could feel the woman's terror and rage warring with something else, something that might have been remorse. "The codes," the 8-year-old girl said gently. "Give us the codes, and we can save the babies." For a long moment, Dr. Blackwood fought against the network's influence. But finally, inevitably, the information began to flow. Security codes, facility layouts, the locations of every trapped child and tortured animal. "Building C, sublevel 7, she said, her voice hollow with defeat. "That's where the nursery is, but the elevator shafts are rigged with motion sensors, and the ventilation system is filled with knockout gas." "Then we don't use the elevators or the vents," Luna said, rising to her full, imposing height. "We use the mountain itself." Through the network, Mira felt her daughter reaching out to the trees and rocks and earth around the facility. The mountain was ancient, honeycombed with natural caves and passages that predated human construction by millions of years. "The trees can guide us through the old cave system," Emma said, flickering between solid and translucent as her excitement grew. "And I can phase through any barriers they've built." "The animals can carry the babies," the mountain lion added, her voice carrying the authority of a natural leader. "We're faster and more agile than humans in rough terrain." Mira felt a plan forming through the network consciousness. Not just her plan, but the collective will of thousands of enhanced beings working toward a single goal. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely unprecedented in human history. "One more thing," Colonel Wade said as the group prepared to leave. "The explosives in the facility aren't just set to destroy the building. They're designed to trigger a massive landslide that will bury the entire mountain. If we don't evacuate everyone in time." She didn't need to finish. Through the network, everyone could feel the scope of the devastation that awaited. Not just the facility, but the entire surrounding valley would be wiped out. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. 93 minutes, Dr. Blackwood said, the network compelling her to honesty. "The countdown started the moment the first facility was breached." Mira looked down at her daughter, feeling the weight of impossible responsibility. In 93 minutes, they had to infiltrate a heavily guarded facility, rescue 12 babies, evacuate thousands of people from the valley, and somehow prevent a catastrophe that would be visible from space. Her daughter looked back at her with those impossibly intelligent eyes and gurgled softly. Through the network, her message was crystal clear. "Don't worry, Mama. We've got this." 90 minutes later, the mountain erupted like an ancient volcano awakening from a 1,000-year sleep. But instead of lava and ash, it expelled something far more precious, life itself. From every cave mouth, every hidden passage, every crack in the ancient stone, they emerged. Children floating through solid rock, their eyes blazing with the light of freedom. Animals moving with supernatural grace, each carrying a precious bundle wrapped in hospital blankets. Trees bending and swaying to create living bridges across impossible chasms. Mira stood on the valley floor, her daughter cradled against her chest, watching the most beautiful sight she had ever witnessed. Through the network, she could feel each rescued child, each liberated animal, each blade of grass that had joined their cause. The baby in her arms had done something unprecedented in human history. She had given nature itself a voice in its own liberation. Luna emerged from the largest cave opening, her massive form silhouetted against the storm clouds. In her gentle grip was the last of the 12 babies, a tiny boy who couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Behind her came the mountain lion, the mechanical wolf, and dozens of other animals, each one carrying rescued children with a tenderness that brought tears to Mira's eyes. All accounted for, Luna rumbled, her voice carrying across the valley like thunder. Every child, every animal, everyone is free. The explosives detonated exactly on schedule, but instead of destroying the mountain, they revealed something extraordinary. As the artificial structure collapsed, ancient caves were exposed, caves filled with crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The mountain hadn't been hiding a secret laboratory. It had been hiding something far older, far more powerful. "It's a natural psychic amplifier," Colonel Wade said, her voice filled with wonder as she studied the exposed crystal formations. The enhanced beings weren't just connecting to each other. They were connecting to the planet's own neural network. Through her daughter's network, Mira could feel the truth of those words. The Earth itself was alive, conscious, aware, and her baby had awakened it from a long sleep. Emma ran to Marcus, solid and laughing for the first time in years. "Papa, did you see? We flew. Actually, flew." Marcus caught his daughter in his arms, spinning her around as tears of joy streamed down his face. "I saw, sweetheart. I saw everything." The 8-year-old girl with ancient eyes floated down to where Mira stood, and for the first time since she had appeared in the hospital, she looked like an actual child. "What happens now?" she asked. Mira looked around the valley, seeing enhanced beings reuniting with families they thought they'd lost forever. Normal humans and animals working together to tend to the rescued children. Trees swaying in patterns that seemed almost like applause. "Now," she said, looking down at her daughter, "we build something better. Something where children don't have to be stolen from their families to reach their potential. Where animals aren't tortured in the name of science. Where nature and humanity work together instead of against each other." Her daughter gurgled softly, and through the network, Mira felt a pulse of pure joy and agreement. Not just from her own child, but from thousands of enhanced beings around the world. From the trees in the forest, the grass beneath their feet, the very stones of the mountain. Dr. Blackwood sat in the back of a military transport, her mind still connected to the network despite her attempts to resist. Through the connection, Mira could feel the woman's emotions, fear, anger, but underneath it all, something that might have been relief. For the first time in decades, she wasn't carrying the weight of her terrible secrets alone. "She'll face trial," Colonel Wade said, following Mira's gaze. "But she'll also receive treatment. The network has a way of healing psychological damage as well as physical injuries." Sheriff Martinez had already been taken into custody, along with the other corrupt officials who had enabled the experiments. But even they would be given a chance at redemption through the network's healing influence. The teenager with silver hair landed beside them, his feet finally touching the ground for the first time in months. "The other facilities are reporting similar successes," he said. 3,000 enhanced beings liberated worldwide. Not a single casualty. "And the clones?" Marcus asked, still holding Emma close. "Awake and free," the teenager replied. "Turns out they weren't empty after all. They were just waiting for someone to give them permission to be themselves." Patricia emerged from one of the medical tents that had been hastily erected across the valley floor. "All the babies are stable," she announced. "Whatever connection they have to your daughter seems to be helping them heal faster than should be medically possible." Mira wasn't surprised. Through the network, she could feel her daughter reaching out to each of the rescued infants, sharing her strength, her life force, her unshakable will to survive and thrive. As the sun began to rise over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, something extraordinary happened. Every enhanced being, child and animal alike, began to sing. Not with their voices, but with their minds, their hearts, their very souls. It was a song of freedom, of family, of hope. It was the sound of nature itself celebrating the return of its lost children. And at the center of it all was a 6-month-old baby who had proven that love, not technology, was the most powerful force in the universe. Luna padded over to where Mira stood, the morning light gleaming off her golden fur. "Thank you," the great bear said simply, "for trusting me with your daughter, for believing that love could bridge any divide." Mira reached out and placed her hand on Luna's massive head, feeling the bear's warmth, her strength, her unwavering devotion. "Thank you," she replied, "for protecting her when I couldn't, for showing her that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice." Emma skipped over to join them, her ability to phase through matter now completely under her control. "Are we all going to live together now?" she asked with the innocent curiosity that only a child could possess. Mira looked around the valley, seeing the impossible family that had formed in the span of a single night. Enhanced children learning to use their abilities for joy instead of fear. Animals who had been tortured, finding healing in the company of those who understood their pain. Adults who had forgotten how to hope, rediscovering wonder through the eyes of extraordinary children. "Yes," she said, her daughter gurgling happily in her arms. "I think we are." The teenage boy with silver hair grinned, his age finally showing in his expression. "So what do we call ourselves?" "We can't exactly go back to normal society." "The Aurora Valley Community," Emma suggested, pointing to the way the morning light was refracting through the exposed crystals, creating rainbow patterns across the sky. "Aurora Valley," Mira repeated, liking the sound of it. "A place where enhanced beings and normal humans can live together, where children can grow up safe and loved, regardless of their abilities." Her daughter made a sound of approval, and through the network, Mira felt the agreement of thousands of beings around the world. Other communities would form, other safe havens for the enhanced and their families. But this valley, this place where the revolution had begun, would always be special. Colonel Wade approached, a tablet in her hands. "The president wants to meet with you," she said. "The entire world is watching. What happened here tonight, it's going to change everything." "Good," Mira said simply. "It's time for a change." As the day progressed, reporters and government officials began arriving in the valley, but they found something they hadn't expected. Instead of chaos and destruction, they found a functioning community. Enhanced children teaching normal children about empathy and communication. Animals working alongside humans to build shelters and tend gardens. Adults of all kinds working together to create something unprecedented in human history. The story spread around the world within hours. The Aurora Valley Miracle, they called it. The night nature fought back. The children who changed everything. But for Mira, standing in the middle of the valley with her daughter in her arms and Luna by her side, it wasn't about the fame or the historical significance. It was about something much simpler. It was about coming home. Her daughter looked up at her with those impossibly intelligent eyes and did something she had never done before. She smiled. A real, genuine, perfectly normal baby smile that had nothing to do with psychic networks or enhanced abilities. It was just a daughter smiling at her mother. And in that moment, surrounded by their extraordinary family, Mira knew that everything they had been through, the pain, the fear, the impossible challenges, had been worth it, because love, in the end, had won. 1 year later, the Aurora Valley had become a pilgrimage site for families with enhanced children from around the world. What had started as an emergency community had grown into a thriving town, complete with schools designed for children with unusual abilities, research facilities dedicated to understanding rather than exploiting enhancement, and vast wilderness areas where animals could roam free while maintaining their connections to their human friends. Mira's daughter took her first steps on a sunny autumn morning, walking from her mother's arms directly to Luna, who was sunbathing in the meadow behind their house. The great bear caught the toddler gently in her massive paws and lifted her up, both of them laughing in the universal language of joy. "Mama, look," the little girl said, her first words accompanied by a chorus of bird songs that seemed to respond to her voice. Luna and me flying. And indeed they were. Not with technology or machinery, but with pure will and the limitless power of a love that had quite literally moved mountains. Emma, now 4 and able to phase through matter at will, ran over to join them. She had become like a big sister to Mira's daughter, teaching her how to control her abilities while still maintaining the wonder and innocence of childhood. "Can we go visit the crystal caves today?" Emma asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I want to show baby Chen the singing stones." The crystal formations exposed when the facility was destroyed had become a gathering place for enhanced beings from around the world. The crystals seemed to amplify psychic abilities while providing a sense of peace and healing that transcended anything science could explain. Marcus emerged from the house he now shared with Mira and their extended family, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the contented smile of a man who had found his place in the world. "The morning news wants to interview our little revolutionary again," he said, nodding toward Mira's daughter. "Tell them she's busy being a normal toddler today," Mira replied, watching as her daughter babbled happily to Luna in a mixture of human words and sounds that seemed to make perfect sense to every animal within hearing distance. The network still existed, stronger than ever, but it had evolved beyond its original purpose. Instead of being a tool of survival and rebellion, it had become something beautiful, a way for all living beings to share in the joy and wonder of existence. Dr. Blackwood, after months of therapy and gradual integration into the network's healing influence, had become one of Aurora Valley's most passionate advocates for ethical enhancement research. The woman who had once stolen children now spent her days working to reunite families torn apart by the old system. "It's remarkable," she said, joining the group in the meadow. "A year ago, I thought control was the key to everything. Now I realize that freedom is the only thing that really matters." Luna looked at the reformed scientist with eyes that held both forgiveness and caution. The bear's memory was long, but her capacity for redemption was even greater. "The new children are arriving this afternoon," Dr. Blackwood continued. 17 families from Southeast Asia. Their children manifested abilities last month, and their governments were less than understanding. Aurora Valley had become a refuge for enhanced beings facing persecution, but it was also something more. It was proof that humans and nature could live in harmony, that children could grow up embracing their differences rather than hiding them, that love truly was the most powerful force in the universe. As the sun reached its peak, casting rainbow patterns through the crystal caves and warming the meadow where an impossible family had found their happy ending, Mira's daughter stood up in Luna's paws and spoke to the world through the network. Her message was simple, pure, and filled with the unlimited hope that only a child could possess. We are all connected. We are all family. We are all home. And across the world, in every country and every culture, enhanced beings and normal humans alike felt those words resonate in their hearts, reminding them that no matter how different they might seem, they all shared the same precious gift. The gift of life, love, and the infinite possibility that came with choosing to build bridges instead of walls. The revolution that had started in a hospital waiting room with a bear rocking a premature infant had become something even more extraordinary. It had become hope itself. And hope, as any enhanced being would tell you, was the most contagious power of all.